Hello everyone, Krishna here, and this is my invited talk at the Health Education England Yorkshire Humber CESR conference for SAS grades June 11, 2021. Here I share my brief CESR journey as well as give the top 10 reasons why a candidate would fail in CESR in 2021. So I am a substantive orthopedic consultant appointed Jan 2020, and I am the CESR lead for North Cumbria Integrated Care. However, 5 years ago, I was an international medical graduate on a Tier 5 visa at Nottingham University Hospitals, and that was my first time in the UK. So my CESR journey began when I came for a shoulder fellowship in 2015. I cleared my fellowship exams the same year in November. I then took a fellowship in Leeds in 2016. I then worked as a specialty doctor in 2017 in order to complete some pending CESR requirements. In 2018 April, I moved to Hull for a major trauma center. And in 2018 November, the same year, I was able to submit my completed CESR application. Roughly 6 months later, in 2019 May, my CESR was approved and I was confirmed with entry into the specialist register. I was then appointed a locum consultant in Hull, and within a few months I got a substantive job in Carlisle, where I have been working since. So if you look at the total time taken since moving to UK, I submitted my CESR application within 3 years and 6 months. I completed my CESR within 4 years, became a locum at 4 years, 3 months, substantive at 5, and a CESR lead at 5 years and 6 months. Now at this point, if you're thinking like Garfield, all right, young man, you're showing off, but what are you doing to help others? That would be a very reasonable question, and the answer to that is, apart from speaking at venues and events like these, I've also created the CESR UK YouTube channel. This can be easily accessed by just typing CESR UK YouTube into any internet search engine and looking for the Created by Krishna Kumar tag. This is completely free and easy to access and has subdivided topics. So if you want to rule Rome, you have to beat Caesar. And if there's anything English history has shown us, it's that Julius Caesar could indeed be defeated at a time when he was thought to be invincible. The common questions I get asked are, where do I start my CESR process? Well, in a nutshell, if you are a surgical candidate, start with your logbooks. If you are a medical candidate, I would suggest to start with your assessments. Can I do CESR in 6 months if I'm abroad? It's very unlikely. Legally, you need a minimum of 1 year, but statistics have shown that people who work for 3 years in the UK have a much better chance of achieving their CESR quicker. How much time will it take for me to do CESR is a very individual question. Depends on where you are. Should I apply for a training post or should I go for CESR? Again, very individualized. The general guideline is, if you're a new, fresh graduate and just out of your undergraduation, then you probably have a shot at training and you should apply. However, if you already have a few years of experience in your specialty, then perhaps CESR is a better option for you. Clearly, this varies between specialties and depends on the individual demands at the moment. Is CESR for me? Again, a very individual question, and perhaps the next set of questions will help you answer that. What all do I need to do CESR? Well, you need grit. Angela Duckworth from Harvard University has defined grit very well in her book. The Americans call it grit. In the United Kingdom, we call it resilience. However you call it, what you need is the ability to see things through, and that's what CESR needs. Never underestimate the support you get from family and friends. Finances are quite important. You might have to change jobs, and with that, you might incur some additional visa expenditures. And last but not the least, generous amounts of your favorite beverage. Now, some of you might dispute the choice of beverage or whether the fact that you need beverage at all. However, the point here is CESR can be an extremely stressful process, and you need to do what you need to do to relax, be it exercise, yoga, recreation, reading, or whatever helps you relax. Now, the Gartner's hype cycle is very true of the average CESR journey. This chart was originally designed to mimic the entry of a new product into the market. The CESR journey is very similar when someone starts with an idea of CESR, which is the innovation trigger. There's a hype of expectations. They start attending courses, talking to people, attending meetings, and there's a peak of inflated expectations. However, as a realization comes of the amount of work to be done and the way to go forwards, you reach a trough of disillusionment. However, there is a slope of enlightenment which then comes with the realization that it is indeed possible, and that leads to a plateau of productivity. And that's where we really hope to help people and catch in my role as CESR lead. Am I eligible for a CESR? That's the basic guidance that's available across. You just need to have a specialist medical qualification or 6 months training in the specialty that you are applying. Now, what are the top 10 reasons for failure? These are the CESR success rates over the last few years. As you can see, they've stayed roughly the same. These are via each specialty. You can have a look at these individually. As you can see, surgical specialties do tend to take a hit, especially the busier ones. But the number one reason is not submitting or a lack of evidence across the breadth of the curriculum. Most applications tend to have ample evidence in one subsection of the curriculum while omitting the other section. So it's very important to tick all boxes. And as the GMC guidance clearly states, if you don't have enough evidence, please hold on till you get enough evidence. Second, it's amazing the number of applications for which evidence is present, but it's so poorly organized that the assessors often miss it or have a hard time finding it. So it's very important to use dividers, summary sheets, to try not to duplicate evidence and to cross-reference evidence as well. Number 3, logbook, more relevant for the surgical specialties, although it's there for literally most medical specialties too. You need to format your logbooks in the way it's required for your subspecialty. Lack of summary sheets and not providing exact 6 years separately is also an issue. Incomplete assessments. Now, when people do workplace-based assessments like PBAs and CBDs, it's very important to have them to be meaningful. This means that your assessor needs to write ample comments on it. In the initial stages of your career, you need to show what you could have improved, and in the later stages of your career, showing that you have improved upon these recommendations and you are doing well. Simply submitting a procedure-based assessment with just ticks and no comments is really frowned upon. If you show progression, it's very good. Some of you might be working as locum consultants and may find it difficult to show progression. In that case, it's clearly said that you don't have to. If you have been working as a locum consultant in an independent position for several years, it's perfectly acceptable to show that you have ample experience and grade 4 in each surgery with some supporting letters from colleagues. Audit is a common reason why people fail. Mostly it's because of the lack of loop closing audits, and the number required differs for each subspecialty, but basically it's very important to show that you have completed all stages of the audit cycle. Second, Your audits need to be meaningful, and it's ideal if some of your audits have resulted in change of practice or in a clinical change in an administrative or a management protocol in your hospital. It's those audits that the assessors look for. It doesn't mean that all your audits have to be of that quality, but certainly it helps to have a few along that. Research, you don't really need to be a top quality researcher here. You need to show your evidence of research. Clearly, attending research methodology courses is one. If you have participated or have recruited people for a randomized controlled trial or have been responsible for heading one, that's absolutely great. But you can show evidence of research by either by means of writing a critical review in an article or a critical appraisal or in a letters to editor. Again, attending these courses, participating in journal clubs, all these can count as evidence for research. And this is where the importance of cross-referring comes. Number 6, do not forget the mandatory courses. They may not only need to be leadership and management, they need to be specifically tailored to NHS management courses. Both the GMC and the Royal Colleges are quite keen to ensure that NHS management is a top priority. Communication skills courses are important to show evidence because the GMC have really no other way to assess your communication skills directly apart from comments from your referees. You may have mandatory courses on the advanced ATLS, APLS or ACLS depending on which your specialty is. Make sure they are up to date and relevant at the time of application, and to show your courses for teaching as well. Now, lack of current evidence is quite important. Although the total length of evidence is presumed to be 5 or 6 years, it's the last 3 years of evidence, that's the last 3 prior to submitting the application, which does hold the most value. So if, for example, you have been involved in a subspecialty, say 5 years ago, and then have had absolutely no contact with it prior to submission, that might be frowned upon. So if you could just show that you're maintaining evidence in that subspecialty or that procedure by means of a simple CBD or even attending a certain procedure or writing a note about it, that considerably helps. Number 8, lack of communication skills and MSF. Make sure your MSF is 360. Do not let it be biased and let it be just a consultant-based MSF. Make sure you include nursing colleagues, junior doctors, staff across the trust, as it were. And that's the broad definition of a 360-degree MSF. For communication skills, comments from your referees are very important, so choose your referees wisely. Some assessors do have a single hospital application bias, although this is not enshrined or dictated in any formal document. This is something that has been observed. So if you have worked in multiple hospitals, that's really very good. If, however, you have worked in only one hospital all through 6 years, it's not a disaster. As long as you meet the requirements, it's probably okay. But do understand that if you can show at least involvement or an honorary contract with another hospital, it can considerably help. Last but not the least is my favorite, that's Murphy's Law. And if you think everything is perfect, you have probably missed something. And this is very, very true of the CESR process. So, to summarize this talk, my top advices would be: 1. If you don't like where you are, move. You're not a tree. It's no secret that some trusts, some hospitals may be more supportive of CESR than others. So you do need to look out for yourself, and remember, you are on a clock. Once you start the CESR process, it's you got 6 years to submit everything. So you do need to look after yourselves too. Number two, if you wait for perfect conditions, you'll never get anything done. That's really very true. The time to start is now, and there's no time to wait for things to become rosy, and start doing things, as it were, even the little things of collecting evidence, and at some point it'll all come together. And last but not the least is my favorite. You not only need to work hard, you need to work smart as well. It's that combination of hard work with smart work that gets you the cherry. I wish you good luck in your CESR application. All the best.